In the movie The Matrix, the lead character learns a hard lesson between knowing and really knowing. Now, you weren't expecting the Earth Day service to start with a reference from The Matrix, were you? Stick with me. I'll connect it all for you. The lead character, Neo, makes the decision to swallow the pill that opens up his knowledge that the world he lives in is really just a series of ones and zeros in a complicated computer program called the Matrix. And he begins a process of having knowledge downloaded into his brain. Combat skills are his first downloaded program. It comes this classic dialogue. Neo wakes up from the downloading in awe and says, "I know Kung Fu. And Morpheus, his mentor, gets right up in his face, Lawrence Fishburne, you can just imagine. And he says, "Show me." So they go to go do Kung Fu in this virtual dojo. And while his downloaded skills are impressive, Neo basically gets his bleep handed to him. Because Neo knows things, but he hasn't experienced it yet. So he doesn't really know it. In order to really know it, he has to do it. The same is true for anything that we're passionate about. We can read about knitting, but if we don't become skilled at doing it, by doing it over and over and telling our hands and our fingers what to do, we don't know knitting. We can learn about the Buddhist concept of loving kindness, but we don't know it until we try to practice it on the person who just cut us off on the road. We can study racial justice, but we may not really know it until we choose to make phone calls to our neighbors, to talk about policing, or interrupt our racist uncle's joke, or pull out our phone and put our own safety at risk at the store when we see racial profiling. We can be passionate about reproductive justice, but we know it at a totally different level when we volunteer to escort women into Planned Parenthoods through protesters on the sidewalk. Or we fight for comprehensive sexual education against legislators who don't understand the connection between learning about consent and sexual abuse. Yes, I'm talking about the horrendous sexual education restriction bill, Arizona Bill 1456, that I spoke to legislators about a couple weeks ago, and it just passed on Wednesday. It's about to be signed into law. We can know how much we love the earth. We can marvel at the hummingbird's wings, the miracle of photosynthesis, the changing of the seasons, the power of a hurricane. But do we know it? Reverend Louis B. Fisher, the dean of the Universalist Seminary at St. Lawrence University, memorably described our liberal religion's stance on this. He said, "Universalists are often asked to stand," he wrote. "The only true answer is that we don't stand at all. We move." We can read and know all the things, but our faith does not call us to just know, but to act, to know. We love the earth. We know it is in danger. And what do we do with that love? For me, I remember the moment that I understood the difference between environmentalism and climate justice. Environmentalism meant that I understood that the environment was in peril, that I needed to conserve resources, that I needed to push for legislation. But climate justice, well, that took it to a whole new level of interconnectedness for me. The Unitarian Universalist Ministry for the Earth, one of the many social justice offshoots of our denominational faith, put out a piece on climate justice several years ago. Let me share what they said. Justice means recognizing that the people who contribute the least to climate change are the ones suffering the most because of it, and that climate change mitigation is an essential component to reducing the suffering of vulnerable people. Justice means understanding that oppressions are inextricably linked and the values that have resulted in the degradation of human groups through slavery, colonization, genocide, and mass incarceration are the same values that are leading to the destruction of the earth. Justice means grounding our work in the needs and leadership of marginalized people who are impacted by and fighting climate change. Native peoples, island peoples, poor and low income peoples whose livelihoods and lives depend on the land and others. Justice means working for intergenerational equity, honoring the leadership of youth and elders, recognizing that today's children will carry the burdens of climate change forward. Justice means honoring the interdependent web of all life by recognizing that destruction visited on just one part of the web, whether one person, species, or ecosystem, impacts all, and working to combat species and extinction and ecosystem destruction. And justice means working in relationship and partnership, always seeking out community-based solutions that challenge the status quo rather than individual actions that only uphold the power structures and values that are destroying our world. So if we believe in climate justice, we believe that we're not independent beings from the earth, saving the earth. We are of the earth. We are interconnected. And by saving the earth, we are saving ourselves. Saving ourselves, we are saving the earth. For me, this idea of justice and their interwovenness, it's most seen through the issue of climate refugees, also called environmental migrants. It brings this concept to life for me. It's estimated that an average of 20 million people are forced to leave their homes and move to other areas in the country each year due to environmental factors. 20 million. As climate change worsens and storms and droughts, scientists and migration experts expect that number to rise. It may be that their drinking water is becoming more scarce, so they need to move. It may be that their crops or livestock are struggling to survive where the conditions become too hot or dry, or too cold and wet, threatening their livelihoods. Extreme weather events like extreme rainfall, hurricanes, cyclones make this worse. These changes exacerbate existing political or racial tensions in the area, adding to the potential for even more war and strife. These are the people who have truly moved from knowing climate change to knowing climate change. And there will be more and more who know. A World Bank report in March projects that within 3 years of the most vulnerable regions, which are the sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and Latin America, 143 million people could be displaced by these impacts by 2050. In Bangladesh, hundreds of thousands of people are routinely uprooted by coastal flooding, making a treacherous journey to the slums of the capital, Dhaka. In West Africa, Lake Chad has virtually disappeared because of the desertification, and that has empowered terrorists and forced more than 4 million people into camps. But it's a problem in the United States. We saw with the Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, 2/3 of Puerto Ricans were displaced from their homes, thousands of them for months or years. And local governments officials have spent years working to preemptively relocate more than a dozen small coastal communities in Alaska and Louisiana that are disappearing into the rising sea already. So how do we take our knowledge of this, of our interconnectedness, and of all of this related human suffering, and take it deeper so that we really know it? Because I know what you all are thinking, or some of you, we can't do it all. Like, I can't do all this by myself. It's just too overwhelming. But I want to tell you that it is about knowing more deeply about what you're passionate about and then connecting climate justice to it. Whatever topic you are immersed in, put this lens of climate justice over it. It's about seeing how it's all related and interconnected. So let's go back to some of our examples from before. If your passion is racial justice, wonderful. And you can more deeply understand that it is our Black and brown siblings who are being most impacted by the climate change issues. You can see how the issues of consumption and capitalism have made the poor, who are disproportionately Black and brown, and have made climate change worse, as well as making issues of race more accentuated. So be passionate about racial justice, but make sure you see where climate justice fits in with it. If your passion is reproductive justice, awesome. And you can imagine how difficult it is to have access to birth control if you're in a refugee camp hundreds of miles away from home. You can imagine that family planning might be something that is much less accessible if you are on the move, looking for land where your animals can graze. If you are fiercely humanist, you can understand how the issues of climate change affect every single human on this planet. If you are fiercely earth-based, then you can see how the actions of humans are changing what is sacred to you. We as Unitarian Universalists are learning to expand our thinking from how we as individuals experience freedom to practice our faith or belief, and moving it into how to understand how we as the collective experience that freedom and liberation. It is not just how I interact with nature, but how we collectively save each other. We started this service with a sampling of your love letters to this earth. And let me conclude it with what I imagine as the love letter from Earth to us. Dear humans, I love you dearly. I love how your bodies move through the desert, climb my trees, and float in my waters. I love how you have seen and expressed my beauty through your art. I love how we are connected. I create oxygen for you. You breathe it in and breathe out carbon dioxide for me. And then I give it right back to you. I love you enough to tell you the truth. I'm depleted. I'm having a hard time keeping you all safe. My depletion is causing you to suffer, and that pains me more than you know. I want to survive, and I want you to survive. We have to do this together. I can't do it without you, and you can't do it without me. In everything you do, I urge you to understand this truth and apply it. In every decision, I hope you will think of me because I think of you. I dream of our future, of us being able to be free and clean and joyful again. I dream of us thinking about each other without worry, dread, or resentment. I need you to survive. You need me to survive. Our survival is interconnected. What do you say we do this together? With deep love, your earth. May it be so.